Hikers and campers of Reddit, what scary situations have you found yourself in while on a hike? On the AT, I was hiking around the Georgia/NC line. It was after dark. I was hiking a section of trail where there were no good spots to pull off and set up a tent. My map said I was 2 miles from a campsite and it was about to thunderstorm. I had a very small headlamp that was not made for night hiking. As I was coming around a bend, I noticed what I thought was a person crouching on the trail. It seems very odd, so I called out to it. As I did, it began grunting and stamping on the ground. Without thinking, I grabbed my hiking sticks and began hitting them together above my head and yelling at the figure. It charged at me and I held my ground. As it got within 10 feet or so of me, it ran up the mountain. I still wasn't able to identify it in that moment, but I sat there waiting, still striking my sticks, trying to hear or see what it was, and the next moment I heard something coming charging on the trail behind me. I turned around and continued yelling, and it ran down the mountain. I slowly moved down the trail towards the campsite I was heading to, still yelling and clacking my sticks. I was never able to see it directly, but met a hunter the next day. I told him what happened, and he said that it was almost certainly a boar. I've had multiple encounters with animals, even predators on trail, and I've never been so scared in my entire life. Boar are different. They have no fear, they just charge no matter what. I was in the woods with 3 friends at night. A friend's house was nearby, and I was getting hungry, so I went inside to find some food. Another friend came inside with me. 2 friends were still outside. Later on, one of the 2 who were outside comes in and sees the indoor friend on the couch next to me. They panic and immediately run back outside. I poked my head out the door asking what's going on, only to hear them yell as loudly as they can. "That's not Kevin." Everyone comes inside and calms down a bit, and the story comes out. They thought the friend who was indoors with me, Kevin, had been outside with them this entire time. Why? Because in the darkness of the woods they saw a silhouette about the same height walking alongside them silently. Then at some point it ran away, and they were chasing it thinking Kevin was running off for some reason. The reason my friend yelled "That's not Kevin" was to stop the last outdoor friend from chasing whoever was out there deeper into the woods. We still have no idea who that was or why they didn't ever speak. Not hiking so much as car camping, but we were way out there in the middle of nowhere on BLM land in Colorado. We drove for an hour and a half down a Forest Service road and didn't see another soul. You could see headlights and hear cars from miles away from our campsite. It's not like somebody could have snuck up unnoticed. We had 3 cars with us and 8 people. Just got done eating dinner, cleaned up, it was getting dark, so we went back to the cars real quick before hitting our tents for the night. Somebody had slashed the front right tire on each of the 3 cars with what appeared to be a box cutter. Everyone thought it was a prank, but it became very apparent very quickly that it wasn't. All of us were beyond spooked, like panicking, scary to watch spooked. We all had spares, and one dude had a gun, so we threw on our donuts, while that guy literally guarded us, and got the hell out of there. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Just knowing there was some person, probably watching us, maybe wanting to harm us, makes me feel physically ill to this day. When I was younger and stupider, and going to college in the North Georgia mountains, my friends and I would go night hiking a lot on the trails near campus. I got pretty familiar with the area, and being out in the wilderness at night in general, which probably made me too confident. One night the full moon was out, and the weather was perfect, so visibility was crazy good. Everything was basically washed in dim blue light. I was slightly stoned, and feeling adventurous, and I love doing fun stuff alone, so I decided to go enjoy a night hike by myself. I took a flashlight, but this was around 2002, so no cell phone. I chose a super easy trail that was mostly flat / maybe a mile loop, in a pretty secluded area, but not exactly a national park or anything, very rural area. I didn't even need my flashlight for most of it, and just hiked in the air. It was actually a really cool, beautiful experience at first. At some point I started feeling uneasy, and maybe a millisecond later I heard a man's voice. It was coming from a good distance ahead of me, somewhere off in the woods, maybe from the right side of the trail. He was crying. I'm honestly an empathetic person, and 99.9% of the time I hear someone crying I want to comfort or help them in some way, but this time I felt sick in the stomach, like a dry panic attack, if that makes sense. I remember coming very close to calling out to him, because my brain was trying to tell me he might be hurt, which was the only reason I hesitated, but it was like my body shut my voice down before I could say anything, and I knew I had to stay very quiet. He was sobbing, like he'd just found out a loved one had died, but also gibbering and almost babbling, like he was less than a person. There was a shrillness to it, under his crying, like he was holding back a scream, but perpetually, on and on, as if he'd been doing it all night. I remember it vividly, and my spine is tingling, like crazy even as I write this. It's hard to explain, but I knew deep down he wasn't right in the head, and nothing good would happen if he realized I was listening. I went back the way I came. It was like I had tunnel hearing, and the only sound in the world was that crying. I was hyper aware of everything else around me, and beyond paranoid that I would snap a branch or snag my boot on something. I worried the man's crying would get louder if I wasn't paying razor sharp attention, getting closer, or turn into an outraged crazy person scream. Thankfully it just faded the further I got from it, and I made it back to my car. Still, I was convinced some wild-eyed hermit was going to rush out of the forest and bite me to death, right up to the second I locked my doors and got out of there. I finally had the rest of my panic attack on the drive back. I managed to park back at campus, and I just sat in the car and collected myself. Adrenaline is powerful. I have never felt a shred of guilt about leaving that guy crying out in the woods in the dark. I know I was slightly stoned, but slightly is the key word there. I'm convinced to this day I was in very real danger that night. Definitely not as insane as most of the stories in threads like this, but sometimes I get that same sick feeling deep down whenever I wonder what might have happened if the moon been less bright, or if I'd been more responsible and I'd decided to use my flashlight even once. He'd have seen me for sure. This happened to me a few years ago. I used to go to school at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm a runner and the campus is in a beautiful redwood forest, so I would run on the trails. One day I left a little later than usual on a run through one of the more isolated trails. Here's where it gets weird. I was about 15 minutes running deep into the woods and still hadn't seen anyone else around. Suddenly, up ahead, I saw what appeared to be a homeless man in ragged clothing walking on the trail. Now, he was walking further into the woods, and this path went very far and the sun was setting. This man was spending the night in the woods. I wanted to reach my usual running checkpoint before turning back, so I decided to keep my distance and run by. As soon as I passed the man, he called out to me. What came first, light or sound? In my head I was like, WTF, this guy's nuts, but I decided to humor him and yelled out light without looking back. He said, well, I think it's sound, but who knows, and started mumbling to himself. I continued on. I reached my goal and started to head back. It was really dark now, and I was feeling sketched out that I had to pass this guy again to get back. He seemed pretty crazy and potentially dangerous, but I didn't have a choice. I got past the point where I first passed him, but he was nowhere to be seen. There weren't any other branches of the trail, and if he had headed back I would have seen him by then. He must have gone off the trail. Suddenly a girl from up on a hill screamed for me to stop. I stopped and looked up on the hill, but it was too dark to see anything. I was freaked out. I called out to ask if she was alright and eventually saw her climbing down. The hill was really steep, so she put in a lot of effort to get up there and away from whatever was after her. She said that she was on a run when a scary homeless guy started harassing her and he chased her up the hill. But she didn't know where he went. She was going to spend the night there until I came along because she was too scared to go back down. At this point we both wanted to get the hell out of there. Who knew if this creepy man was like lurking around watching us from the dark? So we ran back together and made it to the road. She thanked me and we parted ways. Never ran back on that trail again. Santa Cruz can be a pretty weird place. I've heard legends of students flunking out of school there and then just living in the forest. Maybe this guy was a student from years past. My girlfriend and I had driven down an old dirt road that ran beside a lake on one side with mountains on the other. We were looking for unexplored territory to hike in. The dirt road became a trail and eventually was swallowed up entirely by the forest. Once the path became impassable by car, we got out and hiked for quite some time and began making our way back to the car as the sun was going down. It was a challenge getting the car turned around, but I finally managed and we were off. It was slow going as it was a shitty road and getting dark fast. Suddenly we came to a fork in the path that hadn't been visible coming the other way. Neither of us had any idea whether to go right or left, so I just picked randomly, hoping that both would end up taking us back to the main road. As we rounded a small curve in the road, our headlights fall upon a man dragging a large hockey duffel bag off the trail into the woods. As soon as the lights hit him, he just froze completely still. Driving past him felt like an eternity because we couldn't have been doing more than 5 miles an hour due to the shitty road. My girlfriend and I didn't say a word to each other until we were well past him, at which point we were like, WTF was that? And then the road ended. Just like where we had stopped the first time, the forest had swallowed up this part of the road. We were going to have to turn around and drive by the man with the human-sized duffel bag again. I told my girlfriend to buckle up and hold on tight because at the first sign of trouble I was going to gun it. We came to the spot where the man was, and he was nowhere to be seen. We eventually made it to the right path and got the fuck out of there. The weirdest thing about it was that there wasn't a vehicle anywhere near this guy for 50 miles in either direction. We would have seen it if there had been. We'd traveled as far as possible both ways and there just wasn't a place to pull off of the road. How the hell did he get there? Where was he going? What was in the bag? Pretty late to the party, so this will probably be buried, but here it goes. One night my friend and I decided to hike to the top of this small mountain at night for a meteor shower. There were 4 of us, all around 16 at the time, and thought it would be cool. We drove over and started hiking. We took a break about halfway when we noticed there was a guy following us in a business suit. We were weirded out, so we decided to start back up and walk a bit faster. But by the next time we stopped he was like 10 feet away, so we bit the bullet to see if he'd just walk by. He didn't. He stopped and asked if we were there for the meteor shower and if he could walk with us. Weird, a 30-something-year-old man in a suit wanting to hike with 4 16-year-olds, but whatever. As we were walking, my friend and I noticed he was walking really close to our friend, the only girl in the group, like he could smell her shampoo clothes. We got to the top, sat down, and he sat down almost right up on our friend. With her reasonably freaked out, I made an excuse on why we have to leave early, and we promptly booked it the fuck out of there. Nearly running the entire way down. When we got back to the car we thought cool, we ditched the weirdo. But no. When we were all in the car, my friend pointed out that this guy is full on sprinting down the trail and towards our car with a large stick. Being in a car we just drove out of there very shook up. We chalked it up to some dude on some hell of a drug, but 2 days later we all got a text linking us to a news report about a guy that had strangled his wife and then proceeded to kill another girl later that night on a hiking trail. It was the guy. The same dude at the same hiking trail. We never told our parents about the incident and never went back there. Ever. Edit. A lot of people are asking for an article. I won't be posting it due to the fact that it tells you my exact small town and state, but if you really want it, you can find the article with a bit of digging.